Our next speaker is going to explore the question of visible unity in reconciled diversity, how to continue the mission of Carta Ecumenica. For those outside Europe, this is a set of guidelines for the growing cooperation among the churches in Europe signed jointly by CEC and the Council of European Bishops' Conferences in 2001. I'm really honored to introduce Professor Friederike Nüssel, who is familiar with the work of CEC, as she was a member of the Churches in Dialogue Commission for several years. Since 2006, she is full professor of systematic theology and director of the Ecumenical Institute at Heidelberg University. She has served on various ecumenical dialogue groups, including the Meissen Theological Conference, where she is co-chair, and the joint working group between the World Council of Churches and the Catholic Church. Welcome, Professor Nüssel. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katharina, and I'm very glad to be with this group and to be invited, and will now begin with my paper and read it from my manuscript. In April 2001, CEC and the Roman Catholic Council of European Bishops' Conferences, CCE, published Carta Ecumenica in its final form after a 4-year process of negotiating and drafting. The first initiative had come out of the plenary meeting of CEC in Graz in 1997. As stated in the introduction, the document marks the beginning of the century by calling the churches in Europe to dialogue, unity and action, and particularly to their common responsibility in facing issues of peace and justice in Europe. The CO, Carta Ecumenica CO, as an ecumenical milestone, I understand Carta Ecumenica as an ecumenical milestone in several respects, and from these respects I will also draw some ideas how to continue the mission. The first respect is it is a motor and fruit of new formation of ecumenism in Europe after 1989. The second respect, why it's important, is its interpretation of visible unity. The third is the support of human values that are fundamental for the European unification process. And finally, it is important because of its special character in binding people to self-commitments. So I will begin in a first paragraph on impulse to create ecclesial cohesion in Europe after 1989. CO was the fruit of a process of new orientation of CEC and its original goals as an ecumenical institution, as it was founded in 1959. This new orientation was necessary in response to the end of the East-West conflict and the process of the expansion of the European Union after 1989. CEC had lost its traditional function to support communication and ecumenism across the Iron Curtain and discovered a new role in the process of European unification. This in turn afforded to strengthen the cooperation with other ecclesial institutions on the European level, especially CCEE and also the Community of Protestant Churches in Europe. Thus, CO is itself a sign of new ecumenical cooperation. The development of European politics after 1989 required churches to develop organizational elements and formats to give voice to Christian convictions on ethical, social and political issues, which was efficiently supported by different dialogue groups and in CEC and the headquarters in Geneva and later Brussels. The process had led to CO, and the process that followed from it was important for the member churches of CEC and their ecumenical presence and activity in Europe. CO is an outstanding ecumenical document, I think. In my view, it displays some kind of theological beauty, actually. It is a short text, almost parsimonious. It has a clear and systematic structure. It begins with the ecclesiological confession and mission of the Church goes on to describe the way to walk towards visible unity and culminates in drawing conclusions for the common responsibility of churches in and for Europe. It combines theological ideas and reflection, biblical reasoning, and ethical consequences. My second point, the title of the second chapter is Visible Unity of Churches, a Sign for Europe, ? In the first chapter, CEO states that churches are called together to unity in faith. Churches commit themselves to persevere in seeking a common understanding of Christ's message of salvation in the gospel and to work towards visible unity of the Church of Jesus Christ. Unlike ecumenical documents with ecclesiological focus, CO does not expand on the typical ecclesiological topics such as visibility and hiddenness of the Church, the relation between universal church and particular churches, the sacramental character of the church as sign and instrument. Although CO admits clearly that fundamental differences about these issues exist. With regard to the visibility of Christian unity, however, CO highlights recognition of baptism and Eucharistic fellowship, common witness and service as expressions of unity. We all know that Eucharistic fellowship is still beyond reach. Although theological differences in the understanding of the Eucharist could be overcome in several multilateral and bilateral dialogues, differences in the understanding of the Church, and especially with regard to the order of ministry, divide churches. CO is realistic about this situation. The goal is to encourage cooperation between churches in Europe in witness and service in the fields of education, charity, and politics, even though there is no unity on the sacramental level. The whole document is an imperative. It says, don't let us wait to support European unification until we, as churches, manage to reach full visible unity. Let us come together now. Let us support Europe here and today. Why this urgency? Because churches in Europe know that they are under pressure. The pressure does not only come from political and social crises, such as the European crisis, the migration crisis, the climate crisis, and now the current pandemic, in which churches need to act together in developing new perspectives for people and stimulate virtues such as empathy, justice, solidarity, hope, and more virtues. The pressure arises from secularization and religious ideological pluralization. Many churches in Europe lose members rapidly, lose resources, lose influence in society. While some have still capacities to support ecumenical work and institutions such as CEC, others do not. In some cases, it is not only a matter of financial capacity, but also of human resources. This situation gets worse through the loss of visibility of churches in the public sphere and the loss of presence and relevance in public debates. And this is actually a vicious circle. Charta Oecumenica is an ecumenical milestone because it responds to this loss of relevance. It makes clear that churches have to proclaim the gospel and serve humane conditions by working for justice and peace, and in spite of their existence divisions, they have to do so. Otherwise, they will lose their voice. Therefore, Charta Oecumenica is in the second chapter promotes a way towards visible fellowship. This way involves to proclaim the gospel together, to overcome self-sufficiency and move towards one another, to act together on all levels and defend the rights of minorities, to pray together, and to continue dialogue. I interpret visible fellowship in the second chapter as an intermediate state on the way to visible unity. The concept of visible unity has been debated in various ways since 2001, actually since the Carta Ecumenica took up this concept. And we have heard about this by Michael Root just now. There are attempts to interpret visible unity in terms of unity in reconciled diversity. And here it's important to keep the full phrase, unity in reconciled diversity. Especially from the Protestant and Lutheran side, we have contributions here which interpret visible unity in terms of unity in reconciled diversity. One could assume that unity in reconciled diversity is a concept and vision that responds very well to the situation in Europe with its many nations and cultures that need reconciliation in the unification process. If churches would be able to present themselves as a unity in communion in which diverse churches are reconciled, this could be a model of reconciliation for Europe. Yet, we have to acknowledge that it may be too late for such a sign. If Europeans were to value the reconciliation of churches as a model, this would entail that they know about division between churches and the pluralization of denominations. My assumption is that many Europeans are so secular today that they do not even know about the history of denominational divisions and the current landscape of churches and denomination at all. This is to say that churches have to acknowledge, with the words of CO, not only that Christians have failed to prevent suffering and destruction from being inflicted by Europeans, both within Europe and beyond, churches have also to acknowledge that they may have missed the kairos when a visible reconciliation could have served as an image, motivation, or stimulus for the unification process in Europe. The unification process in Europe took place without a joint intervention of European churches and over and against their divisions. Hence, even if it were theologically viable to interpret visible unity of churches as an exemplum of reconciliation for people, we have to realize that it is probably too late for such a sign to be understood. The approach of Carta Ecumenica to encourage visible unity in discipleship is the way to walk. But this does not mean to give up the vision of visible unity. Just in the face of European unification process, churches may see even clearer that they have to follow the call to unity for the sake of faith in Christ alone, who is the head of his one body. Therefore, a fundamental task is to strengthen unity in the understanding of the Jesus Christ and to work for sacramental unity. With regard to the first aspect, it is a sign of hope that the joint declaration on the doctrine of justification has been signed by Catholics and Lutherans in 1999, and the World Council of Reformed Churches, the World Council of Methodist Churches, and the Council of the Anglican Communion have officially declared to agree with JDDJ recently. With regard to the second aspect, sacramental unity, it is important to walk towards mutual recognition of baptism, because recognition of baptism is a fundamental sign of visible unity. Here, I see an important task for joint work of KEC and CCEE in the future. And I regard it as an excellent idea that such a project has been now issued by the thematic group of ecclesiology and mission, as far as I was informed. I come to my third point: spiritual heritage of Christianity and basic values. A third reason why CO is an ecumenical milestone has to do with the way in which the document reaches out to politicians and societies in European countries in Chapter 3, which is titled Our Common Responsibility in Europe. The subtitle is the blessing of peacemakers from the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, verse 9. Almost in a confessional manner, CO states that CEC member churches support an integration of the European continent. In order to have meaning and relevance across a huge range of local and national situations, CO addresses and explains common values. In stating without common values, unity cannot endure, CO echoes the basic idea of the debate on values in the European Union, which led to the European Charter of Human Rights. In order to understand the relevance of this ecumenical move, I would like to reflect briefly on the emergence of value language and value discourse. The value concept, as it is used in the preamble of the Treaty of Lisbon, is a modern concept. It dates back to the development of value philosophy in the 19th century, in which philosophers like Kant and later Rudolf Hermann Lotze and a group of neo-Kantians took over the term value from economics and gave it an important role in the attempt to reconstruct metaphysics. The goal was to overcome the gap between idealism and naturalism, both in epistemology and anthropology, by saying that some ideas of the soul are real and given principles as they stimulate a sense of value. The semantics of the term value was used to communicate the dignity that certain ideas like justice and freedom have for the human soul. Although some philosophers and theologians in the 20th century have critiqued value language for its ontological vagueness, the term has gained attraction in societal discourse and politics and has become a part of ordinary language in many European languages. Part of the attraction results from the fact that one does not need to be religious in order to agree on certain values such as human dignity, freedom, justice, equality, tolerance, etc. In a recent book, the Swiss philosopher Andreas Urs Sommer explains the success of value language. Unlike rigid principles, values are dynamic and flexible concepts as they transcend traditional binary codes such as good and bad or existence and non-existent and other either-or distinctions. Values can serve as identity markers, but at the same time, their meaning is open and admittedly often vague. Interestingly, the documents of the global ecumenical movement in the 1960s and 70s rarely used the value concept. The term only really became prevalent in WCC's debates on the system of global economy in the 1980s. But as far as I can see, Charta Oecumenica is the first ecumenical document that addresses consensus on human values as an issue that churches should support. On the basis of the Christian faith, churches in CEC want to work towards a humane, socially conscious Europe in which human rights and the basic values of peace, justice, freedom, tolerance, participation, and solidarity prevail. This was a quote from paragraph 7 in the Charter. This list of 6 basic values is selected in a sophisticated manner. It mentions peace and justice in the first place, which were the fundamental goals of the ecumenical movement since the 1920s. These values are followed by freedom and tolerance, which have become central values in European history just through the experiences of the religious wars in the 16th and 17th century. With the final pair, participation and solidarity, Carta Ecumenica names two values which point to behavior and action that supports unification and unity among individuals, societies, and nations. One should also note the fine-tuned distinction in the text between basic values, values, and other orienting ideas. Marriage and family are referred to as values, yet they are deliberately placed in the middle of a list of other important attitudes to affirm and support human life. The category basic values, however, is reserved for peace, justice, freedom, tolerance, participation, and solidarity. These values are considered to be essential for the integration of the European continent and for the democratic process. While CO does not declare these values to be distinctly Christian values, the document insinuates that they are rooted in the Christian spiritual heritage. In Carta Ecumenica, member churches commit themselves, quote, to seek agreement with one another on the substance and goals of our social responsibility and to represent in concert, as far as possible, the concerns and visions of the churches vis-à-vis the secular European institutions. They further commit themselves to defend basic values against infringements of every kind and to resist any attempt to misuse religion and the church for ethnic or nationalist purposes. With this paragraph, CO describes a way in which churches can participate in public discourse and support basic values in two ways. On the one hand, they can engage in secular value discourse and demonstrate openness and the readiness to translate the spiritual heritage of Christianity beyond the realm of believers. On the other hand, they offer a space for conversation in which often vague references to values can be clarified and discussed. Values are ambivalent in that they seem to be points of convergence, while in fact, people have different understandings and visions. And this is part of our European discourse, that we mark values, but do not really agree of what we mean by them. Therefore, I see a future task of CAC, CCEE, and other ecclesial institutions on the European levels in supporting and fostering value discourse. And a final point, enacting commitment and freedom. A final reason why CO is a milestone lies in the committing character of the document. In the paragraph on the origins, we read, the Charta has not dogmatic character, nor is it legally binding under church law. Its authority derives from the voluntary commitments of the European churches and ecumenical organizations at local and regional as well as national levels. Each paragraph of CO ends with self-commitments. Essential self-commitments to carry into an ecumenical encounter are to recognize religious freedom, to avoid competition in evangelization, and to enter into agreements with other churches. The latter of these commitments to enter agreements is especially important for the formative character of CO in light of the fact that neither CAC nor CCE have any jurisdictional authority in relation to member churches. It is for this reason that CO can only ask churches to engage in self-commitments and create legal frameworks on the local and regional level, which is precisely what occurred in Germany. CO was officially signed by EKD and the German Bishops' Conference at the first Ecumenical Kirchentag in Germany in 2003. The consequence of this official appropriation was that many ecumenical parish partnerships in Germany were negotiated. It was the specific initiative of the Catholic bishops in Germany under the leadership of Cardinal Lehmann, who fostered this process, to the surprise of the Protestants, that Catholic canon law proved to be a promoting, an innovative resource. Unlike Catholic dogma, which can be interpreted but not changed, canon law can and should be changed if circumstances necessitate the change. This is explained in the new edition of the canon law. The law's purpose is to serve the Church as a visible society by governing the Church adequately, such that the governance corresponds to the conception of the Church as a visible society. Some Catholic bishops, like Cardinal Lehmann, had a vision to use the ordering capacity of canon law to give ecumenism a legally legitimized space and framework in Germany. This movement within the Catholic Church is mentioned here because the entire endeavor is a consequent application of the basic values CO wants to promote, particularly the values of freedom, tolerance, participation, and solidarity. These values require implementation in a democratic process and constitutional framework, not only in political, but also in ecclesial contexts. In my final suggestion, therefore, I would like to recommend that CEC and CCEE might encourage churches in Europe to see in what ways they can continue to implement the self-commitments, both in their activity, in service and worship, but also in their ordering structures and church law. Thank you very much.